Good evening to all our viewers, and today we are having a very eminent and a very renowned historian with us who doesn't need an introduction, who's been at the forefront of whatever Indian history has come to light. We are very happy to welcome Ma'am Meenakshi Jain with us. Very welcome to you, ma'am. And
Thank you so much.
so, ma'am, you're an eminent historian and a scholar of Indian culture, traditions. You have an exemplary insight about history of Bharat before invasion, foreign rule, and after that. So, to open up the discussion, I would like to ask you why history and cultural heritage is important for any civilization. Why should the correct history be written, recorded, and passed on to the future generations?
First of all, I would like to clarify that my contribution has been very modest and I have benefited from the work done by my predecessors and my contemporaries. It always behoves a historian or a scholar to be modest about one's achievements. This is something that we should all remember with gratitude. What has been done by previous scholars, they laid the foundation, we just climbed on their shoulders. So this is something that I have to repeat again and again, because this is not a moment of self glorification. It is a moment of introspection and also a realization of what a long distance we still have to travel. So, this is my introductory comment. Now, about the question that you asked about culture, history, rewriting history. It is not very well known why our history began to be written in a manner that was very derogatory to our great civilization. Because if we look at our past, it is really so enthralling that people who were active participants in that period, they wrote such objective narratives. And without those objective narratives that they wrote, we would not have had any idea of the struggles that this civilization went through over the years. Since my work has been mainly confined to the medieval period, I would like to give some examples from that period, if I may. The history that we have been taught in our schools and in colleges uh, presents a very distorted view of medieval India. What are the distortions that I have been mostly concerned about? The first distortion is to misrepresent the nature of the Arab and Turkish attacks on India that began in the medieval period. And now, if we look at history of the medieval period, it is very clear, at least to me, that one motivating factor was the urge against image worship. So, it is not an accident that, barring maybe one or two, all the invaders and the rulers of the subcontinent in the medieval period destroyed temples. There is something to be learned from this. And it is not something that they tried to hide. They were very, proud of their achievement. And their achievement was recorded by their historians in Persian. So, all these facts are there. Later on, a group of historians started to say that religion was not the factor, it was economic. They wanted to loot the wealth of temples. To that, my simple answer is, why were the same temples attacked again and again? After the first attack, there was no wealth attached to the temples because the temples had become very modest structures. But the devotees, look at the devotees, they were determined that they will build that temple again and again, and the rebuilt temples were modest structures, they had no wealth. And to continue that argument, in 2000, why were the Bamyan Buddhas blasted? There was no wealth attached to them. So, this is point number one. Second point that we don't know enough is that the people of the subcontinent, how they chronicled, they wrote about these invasions. We have forgotten those people. But if it was not for their accounts, we would not know that natives of the subcontinent were conscious of what was happening and actually recorded it. So I'll just give you one or two examples, if I may. The first native account, or Indian account, if I can use it, of the attack by Mahmud Ghaznavi is from a minister in Gujarat. And these accounts have survived by chance because nobody tried to consciously preserve them. All right. Then we have another account of the 14th century by a person called Jin Prabhasuri. He goes to all the places that were attacked in northern India that he can go to and tries to console the devotees that don't lose heart. Damaged images are as powerful as complete images. Today we say खंडित मूर्ति को घर में नहीं रखना. But at that time, in those difficult times, we had people who were, trying to find a solution in those times. All right. I'll just give you two examples more. From the south, we have a poem in Sanskrit written by the queen of the crown prince of Vijayanagar. And only one copy has survived, and that also by accident. That young girl, she is writing a poem, Madurai Vijay. And she says that, goddess came to my husband in a dream. And she said, get up. Can't you see the Kaveri is full of blood? In the temples, the sound of mridang has been replaced by the halls of jackals. Pick up the sword of dharma and re-establish dharma. And last example that I want to give, in Tirupati, many people do not know that Tirupati was also attacked. So a poem, it was 100 verses long in Telugu, but 99 verses have survived. And that tells us about the devotee pleading to Balaji, please come and save this temple. So these are, when you ask why should we write our cultural history? Because all these are important facets of our history which have been neglected, and we will forget them. The present generation probably does not know of them. So this history writing has to be a national objective and a national priority, so that the glory of our past and the attempts made by great sons and daughters of this soil to preserve that heritage are recorded.
Wonderful, ma'am. And it's inspiring for you to have said that you've given the credit to your predecessors and that it's been their steps and foundations that we have all built ourselves and our knowledge on. And obviously, what you are doing is definitely we gonna base for the future generations to come. And once you have just spoken about the number of temples that were demolished and which it's not even right in the memory and knowledge of the people of India. So that brings me to the demolition of Ram Mandir that happened. And we have had our own his so-called historians of Indian origin who have done their part to say that there was never a temple or the masjid was or the Babri masjid was built on a vacant land. There was nothing. So why would this sort of a version? Why would this sort of a history be written in India? What do you think was their intention in doing so?
So again, when we talk about Ayodhya, I would like to pay homage to the memory of Professor BB Lal. Professor BB Lal was an eminent archaeologist. He passed away very recently. And he was the first person decades ago who said that there is a temple beneath the masjid. And for someone at such a young age to make this claim, I think was a real path-breaking contribution that Professor BB Lal made. And at this moment, when we are going to celebrate the Pran Pratishtha on the 22nd of January, I think it's important for us to remember, in the context of Ayodhya, the forgotten hero, or maybe not forgotten, not so forgotten, he is well known in many circles, Professor BB Lal. Now, Professor BB Lal said that they were pillars of a temple coming out on both sides of the boundary wall of the masjid. So he conjectured that there has to be a temple beneath the masjid. So subsequently, all facts proved him to be correct, but he was a pioneer. And if we have got back the temple, it is a large part of the credit goes to him. So I would like to begin my discussion on Ayodhya by remembering the contribution of Professor BB Lal. Now, the thing is that, all the evidence that supported the case of a temple at Ayodhya, ironically, was available in the colonial period. By 1947, all the evidence on the basis of which the Allahabad High Court and the Supreme Court gave the verdict in favor of the temple party was available in 1947 itself. The only addition was the excavations conducted by the Archaeological Survey of India in 2003. So what was the evidence? You want me to briefly run through the evidence?
That would be great, ma'am.
Okay. So, they say that history has a way of revealing itself. So I think Ayodhya is a classic case of however much you try to cover the past, it will reveal itself. And it's a very, very interesting story of Ram kaise prakat hue. The story of Ayodhya is the story of Ram. At least we are talking about the temple site. All right. So we know that the temple was destroyed in 1528 by Babur. Now, and he built a masjid at that site. So when we discuss temple destruction in the medieval period, the first question that we have to ask is, why was a masjid built on top of a temple? There was enough land in this country for the masjids to be built elsewhere.
Definitely, yes.
So, but the masjids were consciously built on top of temples. If the masjids had been constructed elsewhere, there would have been no dispute. Nobody was going to demolish masjids that were built elsewhere. The tensions arose because masjids were built on top of temples. So this temple in 1528, it was destroyed on orders of Babur, and a masjid built on the ruins of the temple. Now, when I say that the masjid was built on the temple, we have to keep in mind that the masjid had no foundations of its own. So, the walls of the temple, it was built on the walls of the temple, and there was not even place for air to pass through where the temple wall ended and the masjid wall began. So it was very clear that it was built on the site of the temple. Now, the evidence that was collected, or it just revealed itself in the colonial period, is very interesting. The first account we have is of an English traveler, William Finch, who came in around 1608. Uh, and these people who wrote about Ayodhya, they did not know that their writings were going to be so valuable some centuries later. So William Finch he went to Ayodhya, he wrote about Ram Court, and he said, people come to the Saryu River, dip, and then come over here. This is the first account. The second account is by a Jesuit, Tiffentheller. His account is very important because he is the first person to mention that within the compound of this complex, there is a Bedi, that the devotees have constructed a Bedi, which means cradle for a newborn. So he's the first person to mention a Bedi. So for your viewers, I would like to clarify what I mean by this complex. You know, when you buy a plot of land, you construct a boundary wall. So that is your area. Now, within that boundary wall, that's your area. So you build your house, and the front portion you leave vacant as a garden or whatever. So, in the case of Babri Masjid, uh, part of the masjid was constructed on top of the temple, but the rest of the portion in front was left vacant, and the Bedi was constructed there. The Hindus had a history throughout the medieval period never to surrender a site. They could not demolish the temple, so they built something as close to the temple as they could, and the Bedi was constructed there. There is the first map that we have of this site. It's in the City Palace Museum in Jaipur. It's a big map, and it shows men and women in the attire of the 18th century doing parikrama around the Bedi. So that means that people were coming there. So this is the second proof. The third is a court official of the Faizabad district court. In 1822, he gave a statement in the Faizabad district court that masjid was built on the site of a Ram temple. So that is another proof. And then we have many cases that were filed in the British Faizabad court, which are available to us. Now, when the Allahabad High Court began hearing this case, it asked the masjid party to prove or to provide evidence of their presence at that site from the time Babur demolished the temple till 1858, when the judicial records are there in the British courts. The masjid party could not provide any evidence of their presence for 300 years, which raises the question, was it a smash and grab job by Babur? He just wanted to grab that site, and perhaps there were not that many Muslims over there to offer namaz, because the masjid party could not provide any evidence for 300 years. So probably they came back. Actually, they may have occupied the masjid somewhere around 1858. So from 1858 till the time of independence, we have lots of judicial records of the British period. And the most surprising thing is that the judicial records refer to the masjid as Masjid at Janamsthan. So that is very surprising and revealing, because it means that the people knew it was the site of a birthplace temple, because they are signing as we are the superintendents of Masjid at Janamsthan. So this is the record that is there till 1947, and the record is very revealing, because the judges were British judges, and in every case they decided in favor of the Mandir party. So that itself tells a tale.
Yeah, so you very wonderfully has you've elaborated that even the British judges, they had there were records that there have been, even in the pre-independence area, there have been judicial procedures and there are judicial records which have been the judgment where has been given in favor of the Hindu party or the temple. What basis did the left historians or those historians had, for on what basis or what intent were they writing that there was never a mandir, there was never a temple site, it was built on a vacant land? What was the intention and why would they do it? Why would they create such a mess in the first place?
When this controversy picked up steam around the 1980s, then there was a very strong opinion among a section of Muslim society that the site means nothing to us because namaz we can offer anywhere. But the site means so much to Hindus, so maybe we should hand over the site to them. And that is when the left historians came in and they said, do not surrender. You have a strong case and we will give you the proof. So the intervention of the left uh, in this case can be explained by a desire not to acknowledge iconoclasm in the medieval period and also to deny Hindu civilization its due. So, in this attempt to deny Hindu civilization what was its due, they concocted facts and figures which were there for all to see. Last thing that I want to say on the left historians, the Allahabad High Court and the Supreme Court passed strictures against the conduct of left historians. They said you were supposed to assist the court, you are misleading the court, and you have not shown any expertise in the subject on which you are appearing in court. The judgment of the courts on the left historians are so eloquent that I don't think I need to add anything to it.
Wonderful. Ma'am, you have just said that, even whether the pre-independence courts were there or the post-independence courts, they have figured out, it was very clear and evident as per your statement also, that it was always in the favor of Hindus, that there was a temple and that Hindus were being denied their due. So, what according to you stopped the government post independence to resolve the matter in the light of the fact?
See, the point is judicial proceedings were going on. So the judicial proceedings have to play out. And the government cannot immediately jump into the situation. When there is a case going on in court, the courts have to deliver the judgment. Only after that, the government can intervene. So the government, the Allahabad High Court gave its judgment in 2010. You see, the point is that the case was in court for decades. And it is not correct for us to expect the government of the day to intervene while the court proceedings are going on. And one more thing, at the time of independence, I think that the views and the sentiments of the central leadership, of the political leadership at the center, were known not to be sympathetic to such causes.
And why would you believe that was the case? For any specific agenda or a reason?
No, that was their conviction that raking up the past is going to take India backward rather than forward. And they had this point of view. But within the central government, there were people like Sardar Patel who participated in the construction or reconstruction of the Somnath temple. But the person right at the top regarded this as not the right step for independent India to take. Of course, there were people in the government who rejected this view.
Great. Another, like you said that there were different opinions about whether whether new India, or the independent India should assert its cultural or religious or spiritual identity through its monuments and temples. What is, in your opinion, the assessment of Ram Mandir on the sense of identity and spiritual inspiration that Bharat takes from Bhagwan Ram and the Ram Mandir?
Ram has always been central to the Hindu identity. Valmiki wrote his Ramayana, and from that time it has provided the code of conduct to people of this country. After Valmiki, we have so many people who went on Kamban in Tamil. We have Tulsidas. Now, the point is that the Ram story, which was first told by Valmiki, is told again and again because it is the greatest source of information. It's a code of conduct for everyone in society. And Tulsi's Ramcharitmanas was written at a time when political power was not in the hands of Ram Bhakts, if I can put it that way. And the role of Tulsi in giving solace to the people that, derive strength from Ram. And Tulsi's Ramcharitmanas, the British officials, they said, we are surprised that thousands and thousands of people know the Ramcharitmanas by heart. And Tulsi also started the practice of Ram Leela. And he is supposed to have acted in the first Ram Leela. And the Ram Leela, the staging of Ram's story as Ram Leela, was absolutely fascinating and very innovative, because what happens in the Ram Leela, there is no image. So the human being becomes the image. You understand? If the attack in the medieval period was on images, the Ram Leela does away with image. It tells the story of Ram through human beings.
The person personifies himself as Ram.
And the moment there is an attack, then that person at once becomes the human being and not the god. So this is such a fascinating facet of our past which we have perhaps forgotten.
So this is a wonderful insight, and obviously I think this perspective is, has rarely come to light, and people have not understood it that way. However, Ramayana goes from India to Cambodia to Indonesia to Malaysia to Thailand. So uh, is it that the Indian culture, the Sanatan Dharma culture, was up as far, or or the Ram Leela traveled beyond the boundaries of India or the religious identity?
The story of Ram had traveled to China by the 3rd century AD. So it's well before Ram Leela and well before Tulsidas. It is 3rd century BC, as 3rd century AD, it had reached China, and from there it reached other parts of Southeast Asia. That is well before Tulsidas, because Tulsidas is 16th century and we are talking about the 3rd century. So obviously what went was Valmiki Ramayana.
Great. So, if I talk to you, according to you, how did the BJP enter and create a mass revolution around the Ram Mandir and building of the Ram Mandir, making it a reality?
So, my study has not been on the political aspects of this issue. I've only studied the cultural and the historical evidence. So, I'm not the most competent person to discuss this. In my books, also, you will see that I've hardly touched on this aspect because I'm not a political scientist. That is a failing of mine. I'm not a political scientist. So, actually, I've confined myself to cultural, archaeological, and historical sources. The political dimension I have not paid attention to much because, as I said, I'm really not uh, a political scientist in that sense of the term. So I apologize for not being able to answer the question.
Yeah, because there's a lot of fervor around, about so having an historical or the record evidence we would have opted. But since you have not been into that depth, I would come back to how is your understanding of the moment of Ram Mandir becoming a reality, and how would it shape the future of history of India and our perception of the past? Are we coming out of any amnesia? How will this impact the understanding of the future generation?
I think that the inauguration of the Ram temple is a landmark moment in the Hindu civilizational journey. It is after 1,000 years that a grand temple is being built in North India in honor of Bhagwan Ram. And if you see the reports that are coming every day, there is so much joy and fervor from all sections of society, from all parts of India. I saw yesterday that from Kishkinda, a Rath has come bringing Hanuman to Ayodhya. From Sita's birthplace, they are sending gifts for Ram because he was the son in law of that place. From Ujjain, they're sending hundreds of kilos of laddus to be distributed. It is a kind of joy that India has not seen for centuries. It is shedding of all the uh, sufferings of the devotees of the centuries. And it is a moment of grand celebration. And it is really, we are fortunate that we are alive to be witnessing this grand, joyous moment in the history of Indian civilization. It's a landmark moment in the Hindu civilizational recovery and journey.
And have you observed the Ram Mandir movement post independence, and how has it built up and culminating into this grand monumental event?
I just told you that I'm not a political scientist and I've not paid much attention to these things.
Yeah, but even in self, so if we're talking about, uh, but Ram Mandir movement has not been only the political. A lot of people from the different walks of life have been doing their bit in asking. But it takes me to another question: how, in your opinion, on like this particular building of Ram, uh, does the similar records, similar historical evidences are there for the upcoming Kashi Vishwanath and the Krishna Janmabhoomi issues? And will it have a similar resolution?
I'm sorry to point out to you, those are two totally dissimilar movements. The courts are still grappling with those issues. There is, it hasn't been decided in the courts, but here the grand temple is ready. After the verdicts of the Allahabad High Court and the Supreme Court, the grand temple is ready. If you would know, the cases in Kashi and Mathura are still to be decided by the court. So how can you compare?
But does I'm asking a historical perspective as per the records, like if there are even the medieval records per them, are there any like the British court evidence, as you said, that exist in those two cases?
I have in my book on Vasudev, Krishna, and Mathura, I have detailed the records from the British period. So, any of your viewers who are interested can go through those records from my book. We are discussing Ayodhya here, na?
Right. So, if I talk about Ayodhya, so how would you see the impact of Ayodhya in the cultural heritage and its propagation in future from the historic impact of view?
I don't understand your question actually, but I think the evidence is all around us. I mean, I don't need to talk about it. Each of us can see what is happening, how it has contributed to the Hindu rejuvenation, the revival, the enthusiasm from all sections of society. As I said earlier, It's a landmark moment in the Hindu civilizational recovery and journey. It's the first time that a grand temple is being built in northern India.
One final question that I would like to ask you, that how would you advise the youngsters of India to approach the Indian history? Like how when we want, like somebody may not be the scholar or a student of history, but how one has to create a better understanding of their own civilization, how as a person of your in-depth knowledge would have a message for the youngsters.
I'm no one to advise and no one to have a message. The younger generation is finding their history through very, very brilliant means. Everyone doesn't have to be a historian to rediscover the history, but through social media, through videos, through talks by historians, they have really educated and come to grips with their past in a way that I could not imagine even 10 years ago. So I'm very confident that the younger generation, the future of India, they are in touch with their heritage. They don't have to be historians, but they know the issues, they're grappling with the issues, they're sympathetic to the issues, and they're trying to understand the issues.
We're very delighted and honored to have you with us today, ma'am. Thank you so much for being with
Thank you.
us.
Thank you.